Welcome to the Fawkes Report, the only internet political commentary show named after a 16th century Catholic radical who allegedly tried to blow up Parliament. We got a pretty special show today. Coming to you from a laptop in the middle of an office. So, different venue. No Mars the Bringer of War today. Didn't quite have time for that. But I will say there's been a lot of really interesting developments in the world. And I've taken some time off from doing the whole, long radio cast thing. I haven't made as many videos. But I really need to get back into this because I really feel like it's a prime time to really start delving into the world and seeing how things are definitely starting to change. And there have been some big headlines. Some big things have happened. So let's talk about the Armenian Genocide has been officially recognized by Mr. Joseph R. Biden, the current president of the United States. I will give him a round of applause for that, I believe. It's one of the few things he's done that I can look at and say, hey, that's been all right. In addition to that, another thing that he's at least said he's going to do, potentially, is get our troops out of Afghanistan. And as always, I'm going to support that. And that's going to bring me to a conversation about who is Biden really? Is he an establishment hack? Or is he someone that's kind of playing the system for what it is, but he's really kind of his own man? I'm going to get into that a little bit. We can talk about that a little bit. But in other news, Milo Yiannopoulos, he's been someone that's been really impressing me recently. Trying to make a comeback. Coming out with a new book called Make America Hate Again. Interesting concept where he's going to, I guess, defend the concept of hate and how it could be good sometimes. And that's caused him to do a series. I believe it was Hate Week or Hate Month or something like that. It's a series of videos that he's doing actually on his YouTube channel called, I guess, Hate something or other. It doesn't necessarily have the name to it, but as you can see, he's done a few people already. He's done Denise McAllister, I don't know her. My Fans, 500 pounds. A whole bunch of people that have been accused of a lot of things, such as he talked to a rapper by the name of Voluntary Cell. I think that's Vol-Cell, sort of like voluntary celibate. Sort of like incel.
I haven't done my hair yet. Look,
you're
I'm
into
not supposed
that
to care about stuff like that anymore. Welcome to the sea.
People are scared to talk about it because the LGBT community has become so powerful now that if you say one word about it, you get shadow banned, blah, blah, blah. And I don't care about any of that. I don't care about losing money or nothing. So I guess God chose me for that. I didn't get red pilled by a person. I got red pilled because Bernie supporters was calling me homophobic, and I went to go figure out why. You know what I'm saying?
And after you listened to them, your final response was, yup.
I don't really believe in oppression, but if you want to know the most persecuted, they're straight white Christian males. So I think.
So as you can see, very edgy interview of a very edgy individual. And this is an interesting concept. As we've seen, Milo, has been sort of the gay figurehead of the alt-light for a long time. What people have started to call the alt-light. And that's been a big thing for him. But we can see now he's actually come out and he started to call himself ex-gay. And he's actually going to be starting a gay reparative therapy camp. Yeah, it just took me back to a video. But point is, he's getting started again with being a Catholic. He is a Catholic. And he's getting serious about his Catholic faith. And he's getting serious about the concept of, being ex-gay. And this is a very, I would say, a very big development in political culture, popular culture, whatever you want to call it, because homosexuality has really become a third rail in the last, decade or so. It's become an issue you can't even talk about. It's become almost like I guess racism or a lot of other things like that, where you can't even talk about it. You can't even have a disagreement about it. But having a figure as flamboyant as Milo Yiannopoulos come out and start challenging the status quo on that issue, I think could really be a game changer. It could really open up the conversation on that issue in a way that hasn't been open for a really long time. And I think a big case in point for that, if I were to find one, would be the fact that Milo, in his hate week, decided to interview the head of Westboro Baptist Church. God hates fags, those people. And he did a pretty good interview.
7 billion. Don't think this nation's alone in this. And we're preaching to the world. So first, I'm going to work from where you started. The scriptures say that he who is of a humble, broken, and contrite heart is where God will dwell, and he resisteth the proud. It's painful getting to a humble, broken, contrite heart. It's a spiritual work that it's
who say these idols, the uniform idols.
The New York City International Gay Parade, and I've picketed it personally several times, any day, over a mob of so-called conservative Christians. They are, as a group, mean as a bunch of hypocritical rattlesnakes. There's nothing charitable in them. There's nothing kind in them. There's nothing selfless in them. It's all about their values and their works righteousness. So start there and then go to this.
I have to say, I'm sorry to interrupt you just for a second, and I know that you've got more of that answer to come. But I have to say, at the risk of upsetting everybody I know, I find this so powerfully persuasive, because haven't we just discovered in America that these, as you say, these idols, the uniform idols, are beginning precisely to turn on us? The left is now the Marines still seem pretty decent on the whole, but the army, the American army now, as they call it, welfare with tanks, is now openly turning on conservative and on Christian values. You've got military leaders attacking Tucker Carlson, of all people, and you've got law enforcement who
So basically what they're going over there is that Margie Phelps of Westboro Baptist Church, what she's saying is that she feels more threatened by, and she feels more hate from, if you want to put it that way, people that are conservative Christians rather than the gay marches that she pickets at. And one of the points she makes, and it's kind of hard for me to get through that whole video because it's very long to find the exact points, but it's funny. She sounds almost sort of like enlightened in a way, because you expect a lot of these conservative Christian people, they're just gonna be like, America, fuck yeah, stuff like that, that kind of thing. But she's actually very critical of sort of what she calls American idolatry, of the flag, of the sort of empire that we've built. And she says that we built an idol out of that. And that we've built an idol sort of out of, the uniform. And in many ways, we conservative Christians especially value that whole mystique over the actual gospel. And it's so funny to me is that she almost sounds, if you want to say in a way, it almost sounds a little bit woke. And the reality is she's someone who's very willing to criticize both sides of the issue. She is not someone, if you look at her, she will criticize anyone that she believes is not on the up and up. So, now, it's Westboro Baptist Church, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, they're the greatest people ever. But if you watch this interview and you listen to her talk, you do find that she's not quite as crazy as her signs would sort of have you believe. And that's ultimately the problem with them, in my view, is that the presentation is just so poor that it's just like, well, why did you have to act that crazy in the first place? Because saying things like God hates fags, it just doesn't get the point across that you want to get across, and it just makes you look very sort of ignorant. But at the same time, I guess you could say, well, it's troll culture. Well, if they were owning the fact that it's troll culture, that would be one thing, but they're not. They're actually trying to have some kind of intelligent dialogue with that. So I'm not entirely sold that Westboro Baptist Church is now this wonderful thing that we should rehabilitate. But I can see that I do think that there has been some media exaggeration, and they're maybe not as evil as we've been led to believe. But at the same time, I would not put them in the realm of necessarily respectable. But I do think that he did do a good job of showing that, maybe they're not as insane as people may think. And that's probably a good thing from either perspective. But by and large, I've been impressed with Milo. I think he's really making a genuine comeback. And I think he is genuine about his sort of conversion back to Catholicism. I mean, not that he ever left, but his desire to live a true, according to the teachings of the Catholic Church. And the reality is he's not ex-gay. He's simply changing his behaviors. He's always going to have those innate traits. And that is the teaching of the Catholic Church on the issue anyway. Because the reality is we don't have ex-gay therapy. So, and the ex-gay therapy thing he's trying to go back to, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Because to me, the whole concept of ex-gay is just an invalid concept. All you have to, reality is, look, you know what? When you were in the Middle Ages, and if you had lived a homosexual life, and you decided to stop sinning, would you say that you were ex-gay back then? No, you would just say, I stopped sinning. I stopped living and doing the sinful acts that I was doing. It didn't mean you changed your identity and changed who you were as a person. You simply changed your behavior. And that's all he needs to emphasize is, look, I don't have to act according to this behavior. I have free will. I have options. Even if I have these desires and these inclinations, that doesn't mean I need to act on them. And I can orientate myself to my church if that's what I see fit to do. And that's all he has to say in my mind. So you don't necessarily need a ex-gay camp to do that. But that's just what I'm saying. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is some way to change your sexual orientation. I just haven't figured it out yet. But that's interesting. But let's get to Armenia. So this was a happy news. This is some happy story for you. If you hate Joe Biden, maybe it'll make you think a little bit better of him. I don't know. So Biden is recognizing the Armenian Genocide. President Joe Biden on Saturday issued the document Armenian Americans have pursued for decades. A declaration that the Ottoman Empire's slaughter of an estimated 1.5 million Armenian civilians was genocide. It's a deceptively simple action carrying no force of law, yet it's a bold move for Biden. And this is the part that I'm going to emphasize here. According to the Turkish account, World War I era violence between Muslims and Ottoman Christians led to large casualties on both sides. Well, that's not the part. But the evidence is clear that it was a long-term Armenian genocide. Well, so why this is important to me is that the reality is the Armenian genocide was a genocide against Christians, specifically Orthodox Christians living in the Middle East. I mean, in some ways you could say it's sort of like the Christian equivalent of the Holocaust. And, it's cool for everybody, like the Turks, to deny that it happened and to act like it wasn't really a genocide, when it was. And it being recognized, even if it was by Biden, means, to a large extent, that maybe Armenia as a country might get a little bit more respect. And maybe it means that the Christian populations of the Middle East might see a little bit more recognition of their struggle. And we might see that there are more Armenian genocides happening at the hands of Islamists right now in the Middle East that we simply are not recognizing. and that we simply are not talking about. And that could be a very big thing to look at. But when it comes to Biden, I will say, I have been impressed with him a little bit recently. So he said that we're going to withdraw all U.S. forces from Afghanistan by September 11th, 2021. Now, Trump had said May 1st, 2021 was the time for withdrawal. Biden has decided to push it back to September 11th. That's not a good thing that he's pushing it back. However, big however, he's pushing for a full withdrawal, whereas Trump, at least on paper, had said it would only be a partial withdrawal. So it would be a few thousand troops moving back, maybe 1,000 or so troops, and leaving a force behind. Biden is saying we're going to bring the entire force back. And that'd be a big move and a big step if he goes through with it. Now, that's a big if, because we have this thing they call the deep state, and we have these things that block every single president from doing the things that they want to do that challenge the establishment. Whether it was Obama with Guantanamo Bay, or if it was Trump, whenever he wanted to do anything with Putin, or if he wanted to pull out of the Middle East, anything he was trying to do, you had the deep state blocking it. But what's interesting, though, is that we're starting to see a different side of Biden, because we've always kind of thought of him as sort of like the same as Hillary Clinton. Just an establishment hack, somebody that goes along with whatever the establishment wants, and he just plays ball. That is honestly, we're starting to see not exactly the case. And it's not exactly the case because the reality is Biden is kind of, he's always been sort of his own man, in a way. And there's a certain clip that you can find that Secular Talk did. It was a while ago. I couldn't find the clip myself, but simply where Biden talks about essentially how you have ideals, but ultimately you have to get in the hands of the money, that the money people that can bring you to power. And sometimes you just have to do what they want. And so that is an interesting point for me. So it's not so much that he's someone who believes the establishment or is the establishment all the time. It's more the case that he simply understands that he's part of a system that's run by established interests, and he has to work within those interests to do what he wants to do. So in Biden's case, I don't think he's the most courageous or the best person to take on the establishment. And I think ultimately he won't be that much different. But I do feel that he has his own views, his own values. And that's why when people say, well, it's such a waste that Trump got elected because, we just ended up with Biden. Well, ultimately, Biden is still better than Hillary Clinton. Because Hillary Clinton, I believe, was a true believer of the establishment and the failed order and the, all the elites. She believed in that whole thing. And I don't believe she ever would even consider getting out of Afghanistan. I think she would have wanted us there for as long as possible. And she'd be pushing us further into Syria. And these are things that I think Biden may actually genuinely not do. He may not push us further into Syria. And he may get us out of Afghanistan. It's very possible that he might do these things. And that would be a positive thing. Just like he went forward on the Armenian thing, and that's a positive thing. All these things are positive. So when he does the right thing, I think we gotta praise him for what he does. But it does show a different side to Biden, and he's not necessarily the person we know. We're gonna have to see where he goes. So, some other interesting news. Of course, there's this whole trial thing. I think it was Edward Chauvin is his name. I haven't even been following this for the most part. And the funny thing is RamzPaul, who's another guy that I follow often, the smiling nationalist, as it were. I'm not saying that I agree with everything he says, but I do. He's been one of my most consistent people that I've watched over the years. But he had an interesting point.
Trolls everything. And when they throw a stick, I mean more than the government, and starts chasing the stick, and it isn't on the verdict. There, so the mob is going to riot, demand more blood. If he's found guilty, it's not going to end there. These people are going to still have their hatred of us, and it's going to continue to escalate. So either way, this doesn't really solve anything based on the verdict. And I've often thought of something that Z-Man, he's a guy I read a great blog, said, is sometimes you got to be careful not to chase the stick. And what he meant by that is, you have a stick and you throw it, and a dog's right there. The dog, whoop, its brain just snaps like that and starts chasing the stick, and it doesn't really think about anything else. And a lot of times, I think as Americans, we get caught by the establishment. And the establishment, I mean more than the government. I think really who controls everything is not so much the government. It's a combination, the government, the media, the big corporations. It's sort of this elite behind the scenes that controls everything. And when they throw a stick, is to get your focus off things that really matter. And they've done that throughout history a lot. Wars, or threatening other nations, like threatening Russia. That's a stick to try to get people from focusing on really what matters in their life. And they're doing this with this trial of George Floyd. This whole trial, it shouldn't have ever gained national coverage. I mean, just a few years ago, a black police officer in Minnesota shot dead an unarmed white woman. Literally, she was just in her pajamas in her car.
Yeah, so basically what he's trying to say there is that this trial is just simply being used as sort of a pretext for control. It's just a distraction from our everyday lives. It's sort of a circus. It's for entertainment. It's to get us focused on other things rather than building up our own brand. And that's another thing he mentions in that video, is how we need to start building sort of a community rather than sitting around reading the news headlines all the time and getting all fixated into that. Now, of course, that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm just sitting here reading headlines and getting all fixated into all that. But I think that I'm sort of trying to have a little bit of fun with it, though. I'm not so much getting all bent out of shape. I'm just trying to put it in the way that it is, just the whole context of it, Just to trying to show everyone the absurdity of everything. And I think ultimately that's really the point, is that you can't chase the stick. You can't get thrown off by all these stories that get thrown at us all the time. You have to take it all in stride. And you have to understand that for the most part, it's about us building our brand. And sort of when these headlines come out, you need to use it to help you build your brand. That's great. And you needed to help us build a community. Let's make fun of it. Let's not get all bent out of shape and get all fixated on who was right and who was wrong. Let's make fun of it. Let's get into a little more of the absurdity of it. And that's why I think comedy is coming back. And comedy can be really important. And that was another thing, is that when Milo was talking to Owen Benjamin, he said, "You're one of the best comedians I know." Because Milo's a comedian. He's funny. And we all have to learn to be a little bit funny, a little bit more lighthearted, and just build a community, right? It's like on the right. And there's all different flavors on the right. We're not all Christians. We're not all nationalists. We're not all, whatever you want to call it. We're not all libertarians. We're not all Ben Shapiro. There's so many different brands and flavors on the right. And we all just need to recognize that. We need to build a sort of community of open and diverse ideas and things like that. Well, that's what I think anyway. I like that idea. I think it's very sort of, self-help life advice kind of thing. And that's good. So, if you're into that kind of stuff, I could do a little bit of a Dr. Phil, if that's what you would like. But that's just some of the amazing stuff that's going on. And there was a response that someone had that said, "Milo has sunk to hosting the goddamn Westboro Baptist Church on his show to talk about gay conversion therapy. That can't be real. And also, who even platforms anymore? Hashtag sad." Well, actually, they didn't really talk about ex-gay conversion therapy at all. That wasn't what he was doing. And let's be clear, it wasn't that he was necessarily promoting the Westboro Baptist Church. It was he was doing a hate week. He was going and he was speaking to people that are considered to be haters. And he's trying to give them their chance to give their side of the story. And she had that opportunity. And there were some things that she was like, okay, she convinced me a little bit she wasn't that horrible on. But you're still not going to convince me at the end of the day that holding a sign that says God hates fags is going to accomplish anything or make you look like a good person. Because it just does not work. It's just silly. I mean, the word fag is a slur. So the fact that you have a slur on your sign doesn't make you a charitable. It's a human-created slur also. It's not even a biblical slur. I guess you could say sodomite, and that would at least, be advertisable. She could at least argue it's biblical. But to use the word fag doesn't make any sense for a Christian organization. So that is a big problem there. So, yeah, I mean, I think what he's doing is very interesting. I think watch out for Milo in the next few years. I really think so. A lot of people like Kyle Kalinske and a lot of these other liberal people on YouTube have been criticizing him, saying this is an act. This is a troll. He's just pretending. He's not really doing this. This isn't a real thing. Just don't worry about it. He's faking it. He's going to be back to his old gay self in 2 weeks. Don't worry about it. He's not making it. He's just trying to stay relevant. I don't believe a word of that. I think Milo is on to something. I think he's caught a stride. And I think he's starting to find who he is right now. And he's fighting to find a new voice. And I think he could really be very, very dangerous in the next 4 years as a powerful conservative or right-wing figure of some sort. Or even Christian figure. And that's another thing. It's another thing. Christianity and religion is starting to make a comeback on the religion and on the internet and on the right. That's another thing to watch out for. Lots of people are going back to the roots, going back to the Christian roots. People like Roosh V, big pickup artist guy, right? Now big Christian, Lots of these people that fell away that were kind of secular, now kind of Christian. Another interesting thing to watch. Watch Milo, watch Christianity. Two things might be making a big, big comeback here in the next 4 years. And that would be good for me, as I am Guy Fawkes, host of the Fawkes Report, the only internet political commentary show named after a 16th century Catholic radical who allegedly tried to blow up Parliament. But many would say it was most likely an inside job. Thank you and good night. That's the end of the show, in case you didn't know.